Okay, welcome to another class on Advanced Idioms and Phrasal Verbs. This is from Chapter 51 of the Advanced Idioms and Phrasal Verbs book by Ruth Gaines and Stuart Redman. And it's formal idioms and phrasal verbs. So the first one is with all due respect to somebody. And I want you to know that this is exactly the same as one we did about 5 or 6 classes ago. No disrespect to you. You say it before you criticise somebody or you disagree with somebody. And it's a very formal and polite way of starting a criticism or when you're pointing out somebody's mistake. Yeah, with all due respect, with all due respect to the Prime Minister, he's completely wrong. Yeah, or with all due respect to you, Headmaster, I totally disagree with you. Yeah, something like that, and it just softens. It makes it more polite. Your criticism becomes more polite when you say, "Look, I do respect you, but I disagree with you." Yeah, so with all due respect to the Prime Minister, it's a nice, formal, polite idiom. In large part, in large measure, just mean to a great extent. That's all. Yeah, and I think you can even hear it in the in large part, in large measure. And so you might say the protests were, in large part, caused by very young people. Yeah, perhaps there were a lot of teenagers that were involved in this protest, and so you might say the protesters were in large part young people. Yeah, to a great extent, in large measure, young people. So the majority of them were young. That's all it means. It's quite an easy one, but certainly sounds very good, very formal. Now, if you suffer at the hands of somebody or die at the hands of somebody, they caused your death. They caused your suffering. Yeah, and so you might say we are all suffering at the hands of our politicians and our journalists at the moment. I actually believe they are public enemy number one, certainly. And I think that many have died at the hands of our politicians, our journalists, in the course of the last few years, I have no doubt. Okay, so if you take issue with somebody about something or over something, this means that you disagree with that person. That's all it means. If you take issue with somebody, you disagree with that somebody about that something. And you could take issue with something. You might say, I take issue with the idea that, abortion should be available, on the NHS, on the free healthcare service. So you might say that. It's not true. I'm just using it as an example, but you might say, I take issue with the idea that abortion should be available to everybody. You might disagree with that, you might agree with that, but let me give you a different example. I take issue with most government policies at the moment. I really do. And I take issue with the government's medical policies. I think that years and years ago, we had a decent health service, and for the last few years, we seem to have been wreaking havoc. We've been doing our best to rip the health service to pieces. Okay, so I take issue with those policies. So you can take issue with government policy, or you can take issue with politicians, and of course I do both. Now, if you pay your last respects to somebody, that somebody has died, and you probably went to their funeral to pay your last respects. Yeah, so this is definitely a life and death bit of vocabulary. You use this just after you've offered your sincere condolences to the widow or the family that have experienced some kind of tragic loss, and you pay your last respects to the person who has died. Now, if you're a soldier, you might lay down your life for somebody, or you might lay down your life for something. And of course, this means sacrifice your life. That's all it means. It means sacrifice your life. Now, you don't have to be a soldier. You might lay down your life for something and not be a soldier, yeah? But I think the most obvious example I can give you here is, say, something like our ancestors laid down their lives to win the Second World War, for example. They laid down their lives for freedom, something like that, yeah? And of course, this is precisely what soldiers must do. They have to lay down their lives for their country, for their queen and country, we say. Okay, so I hope that one's clear. To hold sway now, and this is a common one, and I thought of 3 different ways we could use this. It generally means to hold power and exert influence over somebody. Yeah, it means to have power and influence over somebody or over something. Now, you can say this with ideas. You can certainly say, you know, these ideas held sway for 100 years. You might say the ideas of Stoic philosophers held sway in Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they really did. It was almost 500 years that Stoic ideas held sway. And so it just means that they had an influence, and they had a massive influence, these ideas. They still have an influence, actually. But those Stoic philosophers, that the ideas that they came up with held sway in Greece, in Italy, in Turkey for a very long time. And they held sway over the population, yeah, over the people. But you could use it like this. The Prime Minister's wife, and I think this is actually true if we're talking about my Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's wife holds sway over a lot of government policy. Yeah, I mean, she's not just a pretty face, but she actually holds sway over an incredible amount of government policy. In my opinion, I can see that it comes from her sometimes, but it doesn't only come from her. I mean, I think the PM's father, his ideas also hold sway over a lot of government policy. And I think quite often he's... well, I think his policies and the Chinese Communist Party's policies are actually very similar. Strangely enough, these ideas, these communist ideas, still hold sway in many parts of the world, including in the UK and the US and Europe. Now, you might not use it like that. You might use it like this. You might be talking about power as in, and influence as in guns, military, yeah? And you might say the rebels, yeah, the armed rebels, hold sway over the eastern part of the island, meaning they hold power and influence. They're in charge there, yeah? Their guns have got the power in that area, so the rebels hold sway over the island. Yeah, they've got power. They've completely taken over the island. It's their island if they hold sway over the island. Okay, next one. Therein lies, and therein lies the rub are the words that immediately come to me, because I'm pretty sure that's from Shakespeare. Therein lies the rub, but I might be wrong. I'm not an expert with Shakespeare at all. So therein lies. Let me give you an example of using this, because it's actually quite an easy one, but you won't understand it without an example. So 1984, this is a book that I talk about a lot simply because I wrote a grammar book based on this.